The reason why I think the mansion was very cultured, looking at it again, it's because we were all almost angry and hoped to think of Hef as this really good kind of man. And you started to feel like, oh, it's not what they say in the media. It's just not what they say in the media. A nice man. Another thing that reminds me of a cult is how easy it was to get isolated from the outside world there.
What are the experiences a woman had to go through to become a prominent Playboy bunny? What scandalous secrets came to light after the founder of such an iconic brand died? How were the abuses able to perpetuate over so many decades? In this report, we'll discuss that and many other topics. Right now, from our cell phone, we can access services like OnlyFans and find all kinds of adult content. Anyone can be the star of their own adult movie and make money from it. Even if you don't want to go that far. Just figuring out how to monetize other people's fetishes is enough to keep our virtual coffers growing. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when erotic stimuli were limited to live shows of very dubious reputation. Illegal shows in most cases, which often did not consider the well-being of those who participated in them. Access to certain material that was classified as forbidden was simply a luxury for very few chosen ones. But something came to break the taboos and brought out of hiding interests that morality had swept under the rug. This turning point, decisive in terms of sexual entertainment, was powered by none other than a magazine. A magazine that became a symbol of its time, a magazine that presented the novelties of the high-end automotive industry. Stories from renowned writers, guides to exotic liquors for connoisseurs, or interviews with character actors. However, it was none of this that put that magazine on the podium of the most purchased by the male public. But the sophisticated photo sessions that were inside, sessions that showed the divas of the moment in the nude, and whether stated or not metaphorically. Such was the success of that magazine that sooner rather than later it began to need its own physical place, away from the editorial offices. Disney required an amusement park and a real castle to enhance his ideas. This magazine stretched its tentacles and many of its foundations materialized in a kind of secret bunker. We're talking about a lair that would be the ultimate mirror of an entire empire, which would end, like all empires, in a spiral of decadence and monstrosities. Today, the dark side of the Playboy mansion. Before we begin, I would like you to tell me if you ever had access to a Playboy magazine. And how did you come across it? If someone gave it to you, if you bought it, if you inherited it. I want to read your stories about this magazine, and also I leave you with a question to see if you know who was the first famous person to appear in Playboy magazine. I'd like to read your comments below. Feel free to suggest ideas for future videos as well. Remember, there's an uncensored ad-free version of 24 hours before the rest. For the members of this channel, if you want to join the members of the Mephisto clan, you have to press the button that says join here below and choose membership number 2, Dark Master. Well, now let's get started. The American Wet Dream. In 1953, the first issue of Playboy hit the market as a carefree response to the Puritanism and rigid models that the United States had been promoting since the end of World War II. Gone were the innocent and idyllic images of Norman Rockwell's illustrations, depicting a neat, monogamous, and modest society. It is well known that every action provokes a reaction of equal intensity, but in the opposite direction. This is not merely a simple saying. This is Newton's third law, and as anyone can verify, it works just as well for physics as it does for sociology. After years of impositions, now the Americans wanted rock and roll, fast cars, and cheerful girls with short skirts. Therefore, it's not surprising that a product like Playboy earned a privileged place in popular culture. First in North America and later nearly worldwide. The magazine and all its background grew and expanded to form Playboy Enterprises Incorporated, which became one of the most recognized brands internationally. comparable to true giants like Adidas or Coca-Cola. But as is logical, this empire of fantasies had a dark side. There were already signs that something was off at the Playboy mansion. The real scandal erupted in 2017 when the already nonagenarian magnate of the bunnies, Hugh Hefner, said goodbye forever to the parties and the silk sheets. For many, Hefner was something of a hero of a golden age. An era many wanted to recall as a playful, mischievous, and smiling innocence. Others predicted that after the man's death, everything was going to fall apart, and the truth is they had some reason. The man's influence was so coercive that it was necessary to wait until after his death, so that the voices he had ordered to be silenced could begin to gain space. It was then that it was discovered that this mansion, which was sold as the place of dream enjoyment, was actually a house of nightmares. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we go to the testimonies of the victims of the people who lived in this place, it is necessary that we start from the beginning. Story of a repressed boy. On April 9th, 1926, the creator of one of the most iconic rabbits in culture was born in Chicago. No, we're not referring to the creators of Roger Rabbit or Bugs Bunny. We're discussing Hugh Hefner, who instead of focusing on cartoons, would be the mastermind. Behind a logo that still arouses the most varied opinions today, Hugh, who would later be remembered for boasting a very high lifestyle, spent his early years in a rather humble situation. The Great Depression was wreaking havoc on the American people, and the boy isolated himself from the gray environment, taking refuge in comics and movies of the time. While the adults talked about the difficult economic situation of the country, he let his imagination fly, dreamed of fantasy landscapes, and was putting together strange situations in his mind. This fascination with creating worlds was not endorsed by his parents, who were Orthodox Methodists, and they did not look kindly on their little one diverting his attention from learnings they considered more noble. Imagine their reaction when the little one, with a bit of curiosity, asked them about sex. He wanted to know a bit more about this. And you might say, well, what did they do? Did they dodge the question? Did they answer him? What happened? Basically, what happened was that they punished him, quickly understanding that his home was a land of prohibitions. The young man, after serving in the army towards the end of World War II, studied psychology at the University of Illinois. His plan was to open his mind to new horizons. And this detail can be very revealing because it was to psychology that Hugh turned when devising his concept for the magazine that would make him famous. Moreover, it was based on intricate and perverse mind games that he sustained his turbulent private life. His restless personality led him to seek ways to communicate his ideas to more and more people, so he soon showed a remarkable interest in the publishing world. His ingenuity shone through his work on Jaff, a humorous student magazine. Evidence gradually showed that sexuality was his favorite topic. In Jaff, one could see glimpses of what would later become Playboy, like the presence of a model on the cover and her description written by Hefner, something similar to what he later called Playmate. At the same time, the aspiring tycoon married his first wife, Mildred Williams, the woman with whom he lost his virginity, as he himself would tell. Soon, they had 2 children. On the surface, they were a young family with a prosperous future ahead. However, Hugh felt that he was living a farce. He had a creative job, a wife, children. He had met several of the expectations with which he had been raised, but that did not fully satisfy him. So, during his long nights of insomnia, he began to give free rein to a project that had long been hovering over his thoughts. Jeff, as he was also known, had in mind a new magazine. A publication filled with eroticism that sought to turn every last one of the gentleman's romantic dreams into reality. Hugh's idea was clear: to embrace the purest form of hedonism, and to dethrone that outdated idea that said sex should always occur within the confines of marriage. With these premises circling his highest ambitions, and thanks to loans from friends and family, he kicked off Playboy. He released a remarkable debut issue, featuring a stunning surprise he had saved. He had bought a nude photograph of Marilyn Monroe, an image that had been taken before the actress's rise to fame. And what did he do with it? He used it as a centerfold. This first edition included an editorial written by Hefner himself, where he outlined the philosophy of his invention. A statement of principles that won over millions of men. Because it wasn't just about voluptuous women, but also about supporting freedom of expression, incisive and serious journalism, and high-level literature. This first issue had no date, as Hefner thought Playboy might fail and he would never make a second issue. But we already know how the story ended. And that was not going to end in that anecdote, because Playboy had come to stay, the exciting formula for success. By 1960, Playboy and Hefner were at the top. The man's empire included a chain of nightclubs, hotels and casinos among its investments, and a legion of bunnies who livened up the evenings with fake ears, suggestive outfits, and black stockings. The good times lasted until the 70s, when the path was already paved and other proposals entered the market. Proposals much less refined and a bit more explicit, which took advantage of the climate of liberation to bet everything on graphic material. Magazines like Hustler, founded by the also legendary Larry Flynn, came out to dispute Playboy, the monopoly of the male market. On the other hand, the adult film industry began to have a much more direct reach to the public, and the statement of principles made by Hefner in that first issue of Playboy began to become obsolete. As they say these days, too wordy. But it's not easy to take down a giant, and Playboy picked up the gauntlet and extended its commercial line. Thus, without fear of trying new paths, the brand went out to compete in the field of video, cinema, and new technologies. In other words, the bunny with the gentleman's bow rolled up its sleeves to fight. At the same time, Hugh began to live in the Playboy mansion, which from 1959 to 1974. It was located in Chicago. It would later move to its final coordinates. Located in Beverly Hills, Hugh Hefner's mansion became a symbol of parties and orgies for the next 3 decades. Actresses, models, celebrities, and artists alike would meet there. It was the mecca for those seeking contacts, all kinds of excesses, and of course bunnies. Currently valued at $200 million, according to Mansion Global, the property is around 1,360 square meters. Among the luxuries it contains are a zoo, a playhouse, swimming pools, and a private forest. One could only speculate about what was happening inside the Playboy mansion. The same is said about Las Vegas. What happened there, stayed there. Public curiosity did the rest, and the stories quickly multiplied. So much so that no one could tell what was true and what was made up, creating a convenient ambiguity that, instead of being dangerous, only seduced the general public more and more. In 1989, Hef married for the second time to Kimberly Conrad, one of his bunnies. They had 2 children and lived together in the mansion. However, in 1998, the couple separated. The man married for the 3rd time in 2012 with also Playboy bunny Crystal Harris. Finally, she became his widow, and later in this story we will see the role she ended up occupying. Hugh ended up enshrining himself as a character in American pop culture when he worked on a reality show that followed him through the dazzling interior of his property. The subject went back and forth in his robe, always appearing carefree and ready to indulge in the most diverse pleasures. And it must be said, for the average man of that time, Hugh Hefner was someone to admire. However, by 2012, his magazine and nightclubs began receiving harsh criticism for their misogynistic and discriminatory views. With new critical tools, the world in which Playboy treated women came under new scrutiny. And it became clear that this would be the end of an entire worldview. By that time, Hugh began to profile as a kind of villain for many. A man who had symbolically reduced women to the role of mere servants. For some time, there had been rumors that Hugh Hefner's empire had a couple of skeletons hidden in the closet, basically because all empires have a skeleton. The questions did not wait. So could all that had been said for so long be true? Horrible things were happening in his domains, and again the speculations, this time reloaded. No one expected what would happen after September 27th of 2017. That day, the great magnate died at 91 years old from natural causes. It was then that, finally, all the horror that the mansion's walls had witnessed was revealed. Once again, reality would surpass fiction, and that's how our story returns to the beginning, airing out the mansion. The famous Playboy bunnies were the visible face of the company, a sort of flesh and bone mascots who, paradoxically, rose as a kind of emblem of female liberation. Glamorous, beautiful, and capturing all the looks, it gave the impression that they were the real owners of the company. And from all corners of the world, candidates applied to be part of this elite army of beauties. The apparent advantages of being a Playboy bunny were many. Parties, media exposure, the possibility of making contact with high-level agents and executives in the entertainment world. A first step to, with a bit of luck, have a chance to be the next Marilyn Monroe. The less talked about part was that at best, what she could aspire to was to be part of Hugh Hefner's personal harem. In 2022, all these rumors, added to not a few complaints accumulated over 60 years, were organized and exposed. In a documentary series titled The Secrets of Playboy, Alexandra Dean, who is at the head of this documentary project that seeks to dissect the sordid intimacy. Behind this brand, she compiled testimonies from former employees, bunnies, and people from Hefner's close circle. Supported by the statements of Crystal Hefner, the businessman's last wife, the documentarian did not hesitate to show for the first time a more real image of what was happening behind the doors of the world's most desired mansion. While it was evident that the company's most important asset were the women, there was something that was kept under the eye of the press. The theme parties, which were events and meetings with international level characters and included very important person prostitution services. The sinister part of the matter is that consent was not always an indispensable condition for the provision of the service, whether it was through coercion, psychological manipulation, or even force. The big fat cats who came to Hefner's lands always managed to get their way. According to his close associates, Hugh Hefner did not distinguish between friends and enemies. Jennifer Saganor, the daughter of his best friend, who was also his personal doctor, was raised in the Playboy mansion from the age of 6. For her, it felt like a second home where she could closely observe Hefner, acting in a way that was closer to a tyrant brutalized by power than a good-natured uncle. The aura of glamour that the mansion projected attracted, among others, Holly Madison, a young woman who in the year 2000 wanted to join the roster of the Bunnies, dazzled by figures like Pamela Anderson and Anna Nicole Smith. To learn more about Anna Nicole Smith, feel free to watch the uploaded video. Not on this channel, but on my other channel called The Day That. This video is titled The Day Anna Nicole Smith Died. I encourage you to watch it using the link provided, or by searching for it on YouTube. Let's continue. It was known that Hefner had 5 or 6 girlfriends at the same time, among which there was a favorite. This role of spoiled girl was a very coveted position and full of benefits, but also of constant pressure. Holly managed to occupy that place for 7 years and confirmed what others before her had declared. Hefner decided when and where his girlfriends could speak. In addition, he had a set of rules for them to follow. Rules ranging from the dye color they had to use to the total control of their routines. Hef even decided what type and color of nail polish they had to wear, and he strictly forbade red lipstick. This could be, as many have pointed out, a psychological manipulation technique typical of a compulsive controller. Rumors said that Hefner did not tolerate red lipstick for mysterious reasons, and a whole series of theories were woven around this fact. But the truth seems to be much simpler. The subject wanted to show control over everything his business did, making it clear that the women who came to live under his roof were simply merchandise. An investment that could be abandoned without a blink if they deviated from the plan and dared to question the dictates of their patriarch. Moreover, by the 2000s, Hefner was over 70 years old, and his private kingdom was already showing signs of pathetic decay. The rooms of the mansion had been decorated for the last time in the 70s, and since then they maintained the same appearance. As one of the bunnies would say, it looked like a porn movie filmed on the set of James Bond. But if what happened inside the mansion was creepy, much worse was the carefully articulated structure that had been built around to prevent any of the horror from transcending. A cleanup team existed to suppress statements, scandals, and news that would bring to light the assaults suffered by the models and female staff. Women beaten, drugged and abused, and even kidnapped as sex slaves. For days, they were taken out of circulation and turned into pariahs by the same elite that had violently used them. They would later discover that their stories were doomed to disappear. They had the entire mainstream and jet set ready to put all their resources to silence them. Hugh Hefner had managed to build a framework to sustain his power and in this way be able to commit an unlimited series of abuses. After the death of her husband, Crystal Hefner gave several interviews. Interestingly, she had defended him from all previous attacks and accusations. But after the tycoon passed away, she decided to change her version and to testify about everything she experienced throughout her marriage in the Playboy mansion. But why this sudden change in her statements? According to Crystal herself, with the help of psychological therapy, she discovered that she had been a victim of abuse and manipulation. A not insignificant fact, Crystal met Hugh Hefner when she was 21 years old and he was 81. Among the first-hand revelations that Hefner's ex-wife gave to the press, she said that a curfew had been imposed at the residence at 6 in the evening. In this regard, Hugh Hefner was methodical, bordering on the manic. The house had to be calm so that he could enjoy his dinner, which was always the same chicken soup with cheese. Then he would lie down to watch his favorite movies. This was a rest period for what would come later, an intense group sex session, in which all the people living in the mansion except for the cleaning staff were obliged to participate. According to Crystal, deep down, it was all a kind of ritual that Hefner organized to not feel the passage of time. Because the truth is that he was an old man, and everyone rushed to please him to keep their places in the business. In fact, all his favorite bunnies had to go through the orgies organized in the mansion, as a kind of test to prove that they were docile and well-disposed. Crystal remembered her first encounter with one of those parties. She almost found it surreal the amount of gels and sex toys that were all over the room, full of mirrors. And that's without mentioning the amount of drugs, and also the zoophilia, because of course this gets darker and darker. A traumatic experience that the woman had to live with for years, until finally, and after the death of her husband, she was able to address it in therapy. Crystal distressingly concluded that she likely suffered from Stockholm Syndrome. Other details were emerging from other favorites from previous years, like Hefner's obsession for not using protection and using baby oil as lubricant in their intimate encounters. Despite this causing infections and gynecological problems in his partners, and even with a medical order in between, he refused to abandon the practice. And he always got his way. Contradicting Hugh Hefner was an immediate ticket out. He also ignored his doctors when they warned him that he was abusing the famous blue pills, Viagra. Because of this, he suffered one of the most well-known adverse side effects. He lost his hearing on one side. Faced with the expected "I told you so" from his acquaintances, he responded that he would rather go deaf 1,000 times than give up sex. And in that, perhaps there would have been nothing wrong, except that Hugh Hefner was an unscrupulous predator. Not only did the bunnies from Hefner's harem break their silence after his death, one of his butlers, who remained in his service and living in the mansion for 18 years, reaffirmed what all the women who lived and suffered the strict regime said. Behind the doors of Playboy, Brian Horowitz was the butler of the house from 1997 until 2016. In an interview for the Girl Next Level podcast, he also spoke about the strict directives that were in the house regarding the relationships between the staff and the women. It was considered that all the models living in the mansion were Hugh Hefner's girlfriends, and it was strictly forbidden for them to have close relationships with the staff. These rules were not always followed. And behind the back of the homeowner, a series of adventures happened that many kept silent about. Glamour and excess often go hand in hand, and it's enough to have a rule within reach to feel tempted to break it. Today, one of Hugh Hefner's sons, Marston Hefner, who is 33 years old, opened an OnlyFans account where he began to sell intimate content. Heir to a significant fortune, many wonder why an adult content platform would need to resort to this, and the answer is at least strange. It turns out that Master Hefner is a fanatic of Pokemon, and what he earns on his OnlyFans profile is used to buy products from the franchise. Does he believe that he should pay for his hobbies with his own money? And even though he's married and his wife isn't very supportive of Marston's initiative, he continues forward. It's a curious decision that the son of the man who built an empire selling other people's sexuality decided to sell his own sexuality to buy some innocent toys. On the other hand, Crystal Hefner decided to cope with her past by helping those who can't do it themselves, and she enrolled in university to get a degree in psychology, while she works as a businesswoman in the world of NFTs. The history and secrets of the Playboy Mansion have made headlines and television specials. The scandal has branched out but also diluted over time. 6 years after the death of the man who decided to model eroticism by his own rules, a lot of water has flowed under the bridge. Hugh Hefner's inheritance was divided among his 4 children, and a good portion went to charitable institutions. Maintaining secrecy appears to follow the same logic. Thus, everything was concealed while the man lived. Why did everyone hold so much loyalty to this monster? The answer is not very complex. It was discovered that the Playboy Mansion had hundreds of hidden cameras and microphones in its rooms. What did this mean? That Hugh was for years the wise guardian of the dark secrets of those celebrities and powerful people who came to his home to satisfy their desires. Then his impunity was crossed with a series of extortions. There is no evidence, but also no doubts. The Rabbit. The founder of Playboy magazine sold the Los Angeles mansion before he died, but was allowed to continue living there until his death. Now, the famous Party Palace is being completely refurbished as its new owner tries to return it to a habitable state. The place was taken over by looters when no one lived there. According to United States magazine Globe, the rooms, including Jeb's, were stripped of things like sex toys, golden statues, used sheets, and lingerie. Valuable works of art were also taken. They even claim pieces of masonry were removed as souvenirs. Darren Metropolis bought it in 2016 for $100 million and simply abandoned it for a while. Finally, now after the efforts of some city officials to turn it into a historic monument, he has agreed to restore the house to its original grandeur. Right and wrong often relax with respect to time, while today the boundaries are blurred and discourses are not able to encompass all facets of the same phenomenon. The case of the Playboy Mansion makes us reflect on the business that sex hides and the role that men and women have maintained in this business. We could also add that power as it is known corrupts, therefore absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's well known that empire owners have always tended to portray themselves as gods, at least within their very expensive 4 walls with pool and solarium. For its part, Playboy Enterprises decided to close the paper version of the magazine in 2020. Now, everything will change with their new platform, focused on patronage and digital content. Playboy is transforming to adapt to the times, just as Temptations transformed to adapt to the market. Is there anything wrong with exploring sexuality? Of course not. The problem is that after this, humanity's perversions and the abuse of power changed their name and continue to reproduce like innocent bunnies. And that's it for today's video. I hope you found the story of the Playboy Mansion interesting. We have to make the video of the day Hugh Hefner died for the other channel. For the day I still haven't done it, so I promise to do it soon. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and suggest future video ideas. I'll leave some videos to continue the marathon. I thank each and every one of the members of the Mephisto clan who appear here, and by my side. With nothing more to say, I bid farewell. I'm Magnum Mephisto, and we'll surely meet again in the next video. Goodbye.